What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Thursday's Theology. My name is Pastor Jeff. This week, we're going to continue our series of Christians behaving badly by looking at one of the most controversial figures in Christianity. Franklin Graham is the son of the most famous American evangelist, Billy Graham. Franklin Graham has been in the headlines for a number of different reasons lately, mostly having to do with his political support of Donald Trump. Before we dive too deeply into the rabbit hole of politics, I want to stop and say that I'm not trying to convince you that one party is right and one party is wrong. That's not the point of this video. In fact, I think all political parties have their serious flaws. The point being is if you are a Christian, it is perfectly okay for you to be engaged in politics. But I want to challenge you by saying that if you elevate your politics above your faith, then there are some serious problems. This is the case with Franklin Graham and many other Christians who wholeheartedly support the Republican Party. And again, there's nothing wrong with being a Republican, but there is something wrong when Franklin Graham and other Christians make it the only party you can be a part of if you are a believer. And that's what we'll be diving into in this week's episode. Once again, I'm Pastor Jeff. Let's dive in. Politics and faith are two extremely polarizing things, especially in our current climate. There seems to be a lack of concern for dialogue on both sides of the aisle. When there is a refusal to talk and listen to others, even when you disagree with them, then it becomes a very toxic environment where nothing gets done. Within Christian circles, politics can cause splits and fractures between congregations. And unfortunately, most evangelical leaders have thrown their support behind the Republican Party simply because they have come to believe that the Republican Party is the only thing standing in the way of complete persecution. Now, I myself am a registered nonpartisan simply because I do not want to be defined by my political identity. Politics are not how I define my place. I define my place as one of Jesus' followers, and for me, that is more important than any other identity. One of the things that drives me crazy is when Christians identify themselves first and foremost by their political affiliation. This goes for both Republican and Democrat. If Christians feel as though their political identity is more important than anything else, then there might be some issues with our ability to tell others about Jesus. Jesus was not a Democrat or a Republican, so why do we pretend that he is only present in one political side? I do believe that Christians need to be involved and engaged in politics, but not to the extent where where our sole definition is. Sorry, let me back up. I do believe that Christians need to be involved in politics, but not to the extent where it is our sole definition of our identity. I wanted to make sure I got that right because that's an important point. I do believe Christians need to be involved in politics, but politics should never be the sole definition of our identity. So that's what I wanted to say. Now, I think I got all that out of the way. Okay, so Franklin Graham, that's who this whole episode is about. So Franklin Graham, like I said before, he is the son of the famous evangelist Billy Graham and has traveled the world preaching and sharing the gospel. He has been in the news recently because of his political views and support of President Trump. Now, Franklin Graham wrote an op-ed piece last December explaining how his father supported and voted for Trump. He's quoted as saying, "My father knew Donald Trump, he believed in Donald Trump, and he voted for Donald Trump. He believed that Donald J. Trump was the man for this hour in the history of our nation." Now, this quote was in response to a question Franklin was asked about a Christianity Today op-ed that basically called for the impeachment and removal of Donald Trump. Franklin responded by saying that his father supported and voted for Trump and that he would not agree with what Christianity Today said. But then he says this, quote, "Christianity Today said it is time to call a spade a spade. The spade is this: Christianity Today has been used by the left for their political agenda. It's obvious that Christianity Today has moved to the left and is representing the elitist liberal wing of evangelicalism." Now here's the thing. We live in a time and place where if someone disagrees with you, you can simply say that they are fake news and call them evil. We have seen it time and time again by President Trump and others in both Republican and Democratic parties. The thing is that when you label your critics as fake news, then you essentially refuse to face the reality of the fallacy of your own argument. When Franklin Graham labeled Christianity Today as representing the, quote, elitist liberal wing of evangelicalism, he is basically saying that in order to be a true evangelical, you must be ultra-conservative and back the Republican Party. That is why Franklin Graham is this week's Christian who is behaving badly. Because there are Christians who are not Republicans. The Republican Party does not have a monopoly on Christianity. Just because there are Christians who do not agree with Franklin Graham doesn't make them less of a Christian. There is a diversity of opinions, stories, and political views throughout the church. But when we uphold one view, one narrative, one party above the rest, then we are doing more harm to our gospel witness than good. Franklin Graham is hugely influential. A lot of people listen to him. And what bothers me is that he uses his enormous platform to denounce opposing political views. Christians have to be better than that. Jesus is the great unifier. Even if we disagree with one another, it is possible to remain together in Christ. There is space for both Republicans and Democrats in the church. And there you have it. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of Thursday's Theology. If you want your weekly dose of theology, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you want to catch up on last week's episode, click or tap right here to watch it. Otherwise, if you want more information on theology in general, head on over to thursdaystheology.com. As always, I'm Pastor Jeff. Thanks for joining me as we explore who God is, what theology is, and why it all matters. And remember, theology doesn't always have to be difficult. It is simply the study of who God is. Take care. We'll see you next week.